Time for tonight's rewrite. America had its annual media spasm over the death penalty yesterday, and now it's back to business as usual. At 6:49 p.m. Central Time this evening in Atmore, Alabama, Derek O'Neill Mason was executed, and no network shifted to live coverage of the event or even bothered to report it. No coast-to-coast expressions of outrage. There was no argument over Derek O'Neill Mason's guilt or innocence. He confessed and was found guilty beyond reasonable doubt of the execution-style shooting of a convenience store clerk in the store that Mason was in the process of robbing. Before shooting 25-year-old Angela Cagle in the face twice, Derek O'Neill Mason forced her to take off all of her clothes. How am I doing on eliciting your sympathy for Derek O'Neill Mason? How about outrage over the death penalty? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Derek O'Neill Mason is not the case to use to build outrage over the death penalty. Nor is the case of Lawrence Russell Brewer, who was executed at 6:21 p.m. Central Time yesterday in Huntsville, Texas. Many of you will remember his crime. He was found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the 1998 hate crime murder of 49-year-old James Byrd, Jr. Lawrence Russell Brewer and two of his friends chained James Byrd to the back of a pickup truck and then drove along a bumpy asphalt road at 2 o'clock in the morning. They drove for at least 3 miles with James Byrd dragging 24.5 feet behind them at the end of that chain. 6 hours later, when what was left of James Byrd's mangled body was found, the sheriff who found him at first thought he was looking at animal roadkill. Lawrence Russell Brewer's execution yesterday passed virtually unnoticed by the national media at the very moment when they were covering minute-by-minute developments in a possible stay of execution for Troy Davis, which was then followed by Troy Davis's actual execution at 11:08 p.m. in Jackson, Georgia. Many death penalty protesters were heard on this network and others, all focusing on the injustice being done to Troy Davis. But the legendary civil rights hero Dick Gregory, who has been protesting the death penalty longer than anyone you heard from yesterday, was not one of the voices of protest heard in that coverage of Troy Davis. Yesterday, Dick Gregory was in Huntsville, Texas, protesting the execution of hate crime murderer Lawrence Russell Brewer. Dick Gregory knows that there will always be unjust executions. There will always be some executions of the innocent as long as there is a death penalty. Dick Gregory knows that as long as you protest the death penalty only when you think it's being applied against an innocent man, or if you protest the use of the death penalty only because you believe there is reasonable doubt, and you don't protest the cases where there is no doubt, you don't protest tonight's execution of Derek O'Neill Mason or yesterday's execution of Lawrence Russell Brewer, you are in effect saying there are right and wrong ways to administer the death penalty, and we should just do it right. That's all we have to do, just do it right. But as long as we have Derek O'Neill Masons and Lawrence Russell Brewers, we are going to have Troy Davises. The death penalty is a human system created by human beings, run by human beings. That means there is human error built into it. A human system is not capable of perfection. Government does nothing flawlessly. Government cannot flawlessly kill people. If you give government the power to kill people, you are giving government the power to make mistakes, killing people, and government will make those mistakes. The protest against Troy Davis's execution was the largest protest against the death penalty in 11 years in this country. In those 11 years, we have executed 672 people, including Derek O'Neill Mason earlier tonight. No more than 1 or 2 of those executions a year got national media attention. This year, 34 people were executed in this country before Troy Davis, including Lawrence Russell Brewer. who was executed 3 hours and 47 minutes before Troy Davis over the protest of Dick Gregory. You couldn't stop Troy Davis's execution by just protesting Troy Davis's execution. The only way to stop Troy Davis's execution is to stop all executions. If you're outraged at Troy Davis's execution but weren't bothered by Derek O'Neill Mason's execution tonight in Alabama, weren't moved to protest the execution of Lawrence Russell Brewer last night, then you're sure, you are absolutely sure to find yourself outraged and protesting another execution. Maybe not for another year or two, but surely another one will come along where you're convinced that the condemned man or woman is actually innocent, or at least had a grossly unfair trial that leaves any reasonable person with reasonable doubt about the guilt of the person to be executed. If you save your outrage for that execution, if that's the next one you're going to protest, then you will probably have Troy Davis deja vu. The time to fight that next unjust execution that's going to happen in the next year or two is right now.